I'm Emily Rudy. Welcome to Beat the Press. Our topics: the marathon bombing suspect is arraigned, but how he looked depended on who you asked. CNN bleeps foul language in the George Zimmerman trial, even though they didn't have to. Channel 5 sues the streaming video service Aereo for copyright infringement, plus our panel rants and raves of the week. Joining me are John Keller from WBZ-TV, Tom Fiedler of Boston University, Kara Miller of WGBH, and Josh Benton of the Neiman Journalism Lab. First, there were no cameras present when accused Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev pled not guilty to 30 federal charges this week, leaving it up to journalists to describe him. And as Adam Riley reports, those descriptions could not have been more different.
The arraignment of accused Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was a massive media event. But when Tsarnaev pleaded not guilty to 30 federal charges, video was forbidden, leaving it to the reporters who were there to describe what they saw.
Throughout the proceedings, he seemed a little bit indifferent, kind of out of the aloof almost.
The Boston Globe's Milton Valencia had a neutral take. Not so WCVB's Sean Kelly.
Turning around to look at his other family members, smirking at them the entire time.
When Tsarnaev spoke, some called his accent light, others heavy. And then there was his physical condition. CBS thought he looked pretty good.
With the exception of a cast on his arm, Tsarnaev showed no signs of the injuries that put him in the hospital after his capture.
But other outlets noted that one side of Tsarnaev's face was puffy and sagging.
He was in shackles and appeared to have something like nerve damage to his face.
Even the sketch artists disagreed, with some drawing a fleshy schemer and others a doe-eyed teenager. So maybe it's fortunate that a Russian network aired this surreptitiously shot video, which briefly showed us the real Tsarnaev. But that video was quickly taken down. Too bad, because judging from the confusion, it's exactly what we need.
Okay, I promise you we're not going to have another discussion about cameras in the courtroom or lack thereof in the federal courts, although you could call your congressman because they have the power to change it. But it is actually fascinating to see how reporters had differing takes on this, and some of it depended on where they were standing, whether they were actually in the courtroom, whether they were in the media overflow room, or whether where that Russian TV guy took the video in this family room or observer's room it was set up. So you really had a different take depending on where you stood. But, you know, all you needed was that visual impact to say, well, we'll be the judge for ourselves. And yet here we are listening to 30 different reporters.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't go along with your promise. I think this is all about cameras in the courtroom. This is a classic example of why they're necessary. There are no valid arguments against them, for starters. But the fact is that multiple people will see the same thing in multiple ways. That's human nature. And how he looks is very important to this case. It could be the central fact of this case in the sense that will the jury see this kid who might look like their own son or nephew and be sympathetic to him in spite of the overwhelming evidence against him. So I'm not surprised there were all these different accounts. I just think this made the case better than anything I've ever seen for why cameras should be in the courtroom. It's a public procedure. The public should have access to the reality of what's happening.
Yes, but if journalists from the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald and the New York Times and ABC and NBC and CBS cannot agree on how he looks, whether he is, you know, as Adam was saying, this sort of doe-eyed boy who looks younger than his age, as a bunch of people said he didn't even look like he was 19, or, you know, whether he's in good health, whether he's not in good health, whether he seems to be taunting the victims, whether he doesn't. You think people watching it on television would agree? I mean, we'd have exactly the same kinds of discussions because all the people who were giving their point of view were in the courtroom. We'd have the same kind of split. I think part of it is, of course, the angle and, of course, where you are. Part of it also is how you come to the courtroom. What you come expecting to see is part of what you indeed see. That's what I think.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's that old where you stand depends on where you sit, or the other way around. But the television reporter who said that he thought he was smirking, and then the Boston Globe reporter who said he seemed indifferent. I think really a lot of that had to do with what they were carrying into the courtroom to begin with, and to come out with something like he looked smirking. I would make sure that I had confirmation beyond my own sense before I would go on the air or something, or write anything like that. But, you know, what I think was really dramatic about this, and it does get to that argument of cameras in the courtroom, is this week and these past several days, readers of the Boston Globe have been treated to front-page courtroom pictures of the George Zimmerman trial, the Whitey Bulger trial, and now, of course, Tsarnaev. And in the other two trials, you have perfectly done rendered pictures, and so you get a real sense of what George Zimmerman looks like, what Whitey Bulger looks like.
There's no cameras in Whitey Bulger's trial either.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. There's the other way around.
Hernandez
trial. The Hernandez trial. Every facet of that we get to see and make judgments. So it's just suddenly seemed like we were being thrown back into the 1950s by having a front page picture done by essentially a chalk artist. So it does make the federal courts look quite out of step.
It's remarkable. We've seen the legislative branch and the executive branch, and to varying degrees, both agree that some degree of transparency is a valuable thing, and just the judicial branch, which has been so hesitant to go in that direction. I think we've actually saw a parallel activity in the Zimmerman trial today. I don't know if you saw this, but MSNBC accidentally broadcast a picture of the dead Trayvon Martin on the ground, accidentally, very quickly took it down. But for all over the internet today, a lot of people are saying this is the first time they've been able actually to see what that crime, what the evidence of that crime in a core sense is all about. Those sorts of images can be very transformative.
Why didn't they broadcast it?
Because they were just taking in the courtroom feed. I mean, we talk about how there are no cameras in the courtroom, but there are obviously cameras in the courtroom. There are these video feeds being created. It's just that those feeds aren't allowed to go outside. I fundamentally think that, I think we're all journalists here, so we probably are going to be on a similar thought line about this, but I just think it's something of public interest, and the public should be able to see it.
Mm-hmm. Including the pictures of Trayvon Martin. Why not?
Absolutely.
It's part of the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say, and I'm not saying I'm against cameras in the courtroom, but bringing the media into anything changes behavior. Whether you're talking about C-SPAN or a courtroom, right? Anybody who knows that they're on camera, they change. What they say, how they interact with their colleagues, how they interact with the judge. I think that was sort of on evidence most prominently in the O.J. Simpson case.
Things have changed so dramatically since. That's an old argument. And I think one that's no longer valid. We are so used to cameras in the courtroom that, and by the way, it's not like having a cameraman in the courtroom anymore. They're not even in the same room. They're oftentimes in a hole in the wall, and it's just like, if you're thinking about a camera, you should get another job. I don't know.